Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Castro, and I'm the director of the Center for Data Innovation. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's book talk on The Equality Machine by Orly Lobel. Professor Lobel is the Warren Distinguished Professor of Law at the University of San Diego School of Law. She has 2 degrees from Harvard, an undergraduate degree from Tel Aviv University. She's written extensively on a variety of issues, including labor and employment, intellectual property and creativity, and many more topics touching on important themes such as competition, innovation, and fairness. I'm really delighted to welcome her today to discuss her new book, which highlights how technology can be used in ways to form a better, more inclusive future. In terms of today's event, what I've asked her to do is to start us off with a discussion and overview of her book for about 20-25 minutes. We'll follow that up with a conversation between the two of us, and then I'll open it up to questions from our audience. For those of you that are watching the live stream, you can submit questions online. Just look for the link below the video or in the video description. So with that, I'll turn it over to Orly, and thank you again for being here today.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm really excited to be here, to be with all your audience, and I'm grateful for the center for having this event. It's such a great time to be having these conversations, and especially through the Center for Data Innovation, because I think that you are doing very important work in this space. And that relates to why I wrote The Equality Machine. I definitely saw when I have been on the and am on the conference circuit, on panels with policymakers, with researchers, and the kind of more popular public debates about where we are with technology, with artificial intelligence. I saw a lot of misinformation. There's a specific mindset that I find quite worrisome, that really focuses on the harms and wrongs of digital technology and specifically automation or artificial intelligence, that privileges privacy and data minimization, and really kind of tells us a story that is a distorted story. So if you look at the recent best-selling books, popular media coverage, even like things like documentaries, the social dilemma that was on Netflix. There's a lot of this alarmist depiction of where we are and where we're going. Titles like Weapons of Mass Destruction, Automating Inequality, Algorithms of Oppression, Technically Wrong, and the popular term of surveillance capitalism. All our data is extracted and it's all going to doom. The book, The Equality Machine, is never about denying that there are risks and that there are harms with technology, that there have been wrongs. But the book is about finding a path forward and understanding how to analyze, how to shift our mindset from kind of accepting a flat story or two flat stories, kind of a binary, either it's kind of all dystopian or a flat story about it's all utopian and it's all good, but rather being an informed consumer, activist, researcher, policymaker, citizen, when we're thinking about how is all of our lives, every aspect of our life changing with technology. So the book really takes us on this wild ride from the labor market to the dating market to media and online engagement, political engagement, the culture that is around us, the images, the technology that assists us, like digital personal assistants, our homes, how they're changing, and our relationships. So our care, our health, and even our very intimate relationships. So I have a whole chapter, for example, about sex robots and what do we actually fear. This question of what we actually fear and what should we fear and what should we celebrate is very important in the book. So this slide is kind of imaging the thing that I think we all really do understand deep down, that the train has left the station, that even if, for example, there are risks with facial recognition, I show that, just descriptively, it's not true to just describe it as all risk. There's so many opportunities and so many benefits, but even things that are risky, they're here to stay, and we need to engage in them, with them, need to direct the technology for good. We can do that, and we all should really have skin in the game. We should be kind of not just on the outside, critical and kind of on the stance of let's just ban, let's just slow down things. If we really want to have an impact, we should envision, the path forward and have a constructive blueprint, which is what the book offers. So the first most important thing that we always should remember when we're having these debates, and again, I show this in the context of work and automating different aspects of the employment stages or employment relationship, the hiring, the evaluation, pay, questions about performance and promotion, in all of these contexts. So from work to health to safety, we really need to ask this question of comparative advantage. So it's not enough to just point to an algorithmic fail or an algorithmic bias. We need to ask, is it doing better than the status quo? Is it doing better than the tools that we currently have, and primarily the tools that we have without automating is our human mind. So we hear so much about algorithms being a black box. And for me, as the director of the Center for Employment and Labor Policy here at University of San Diego, and as someone who's been teaching and researching the labor market and employment relations and many other aspects of employment discrimination and discrimination at large for 2 decades, and I serve as an expert witness in employment discrimination cases and kind of questions of equality. It's very clear that we have to also understand the human mind as something of a black box, very difficult to understand the workings of our minds. There is even for ourselves, it's very difficult. And I show this in a lot of experimental research that I've collaborated on. I do behavioral experimental research with social psychologists and behavioral economists. It's very difficult for ourselves to understand our own reasoning, and it's very difficult to de-bias us, even when we recognize that we have a goal for equality or for more accuracy or for more consistency. So having that question of what does better, an automated system or the status quo of human decision making, whether it's a judge or an employer or a driver, that's the overarching principle that we need to recognize and accept. So just these very familiar examples of how we still are in a world of assessing resumes differently when there are there's race associated, and this again, a lot of it is unconscious. So these resume studies that I think a lot of the participants are familiar with, they've been replicated all around the world, and it just turns out that it's very sticky. And I do the same work on pay equity, which we can talk about later, but very sticky gender and race pay gaps. And I show in the book how automation can really help with that. Now, it's very problematic, and again, it's something that I show in the book, that we talk about algorithmic bias in this very static way. So there's when you research a lot of this, you see the same story popping up again and again, and it kind of and a conclusion that follows very quickly from it. So for example, the media reports the fact that Amazon a while back tried to design an automated resume parsing and recruiting tool. And it turned out that it was biased against women because it was looking at past successes. What's not reported is this particular system was tested before it was ever deployed. It was found to be biased, which is very difficult to do with humans, that we can actually have this digital paper trail, see whether it outperforms or underperforms what we have in terms of diversity and other goals that we're trying to achieve. And because it was tested, it was also never deployed. And the other thing that's not reported is that we've made huge leaps, which I describe in the book, where I interview computer scientists on the gold standards right now of how to design algorithms that do take into account diversity. And we're really making a lot of progress that we're not even at the place where we were a few years ago, where the bias was much more pervasive, I think, in these kinds of algorithms. So the industry is kind of learning about this, but my argument from a policy perspective is that we're not learning about it fast enough. We don't have enough public mechanisms to test and differentiate between the snake oil, the algorithms, the technology that fails us versus the one that's making the leaps and that's better. And partly it's because, or a lot of it is because, we're in this mindset of just kind of bundling everything as, there's algorithms are biased. We should not automate. We should ban this kind of technology. And so the same thing is happening with so many opportunities in many different fields, from education to healthcare to care of older patients, people who are isolated. And again, I show a lot of the purpose of the equality machine is to show the success stories, to celebrate researchers that are, whether they're at MIT or in many other places around the world, where they're really at the frontier of applying AI for good. And those stories are just very much under the radar. They're not told. And to make us ask, to make us really question some of the assumptions that we are making about, for example, introducing robots and AI in education. So there is a lot of this mindset of, well, if we're going to give iPads to students in underprivileged schools, their data is going to be extracted, so we shouldn't, and kind of the next step in this logic is, and it's going to be used for harm, so we should not go down this road. And I show that there are many different paths. There are very optimistic paths, and that in fact this kind of digitalization and introducing robotics and automation in especially in communities that are underserved has this very equality direction, or inclusive and equitable result that can come from having more access, more learning, more resources, and just kind of more participation and digital literacy in these communities that are so much under the radar and have really suffered from a status quo that doesn't consider them as much as other communities. So I'll just kind of very briefly, because I want to get to a lot of the discussion with Daniel and with all the audience, but here's some principles that come out from the very rich stories and research that is described in the equality machine. I mentioned already comparative advantage, but also this kind of insistence that what we want to achieve is progress, not perfection, and not have a double standard that we hold for technology versus other forms of decision making, of interaction, of sorting, where we kind of recognize that fails don't mean that we toss out the system. We also need to have a comparative lens that is put on what can have the more kind of growth potential or improvement potential. So, it's a different aspect of comparative advantage where what can we correct? So can we correct an algorithmic system versus can we correct a human decision-making process? And again, I think that by their nature, this is the actual term, machine learning, we can improve these systems in faster, more accurate ways than we can debias and improve accuracy or safety or consistency, or all these different goals that we were trying to achieve, whether it's with screening for breast cancer or other kinds of radiology and health goals, or it's improving our diversity in our workplaces or media. We need to use technology and AI to count what matters. So again, this goes to what I was saying about how when we have this mindset of data minimization, which is what the EU kind of adopts as its term, or privacy, and that we want to resist surveillance capitalism, it turns out that we're impoverishing the counting of kind of perversely of many of the goals and the communities that actually most need more data to help redirect resources to their communities or help improve biased algorithms. So this relates to the next principle of acknowledging normative tensions. We barely talk about how this principle of data minimization is in tension with getting to fuller, more inclusive, representative data for our algorithms to actually get better and have less bias. So, the classic example would be that there's all the reporting about how speech to text or facial recognition systems have more consistency, more accuracy when it comes to white faces, to male faces, but the way to correct it is to collect more information and more representative information. I talk in the book about systems of kind of crowdsourcing a lot of dialect and a lot of accents throughout the world, so that our digital speech assistants, our personal assistants that are at our homes, become more and more accurate for all people. So we really need to acknowledge that often there will be tensions between the stance of do not collect, do not extract data, and wanting to improve our service to all through our technologies, improve health. Again, same story with monitoring health and understanding directions during a pandemic, for example, how to understand the spread of and to tackle the spread of a global pandemic through having more information, more data, mining it through our technological capabilities. Same with just improving accuracy with all the automation, the wonderful automation that's happening in health. Health has long had a gender problem and a race problem of not studying, even in very formal studies, like in the FDA approval process, not studying representative samples of having enough participants from different demographic identities. And we really need to acknowledge that this is an opportunity to have much more inclusive data, and that sometimes we have to really have kind of the right to collect or to be included in data collection, not just the right to privacy, which is kind of the one that's privileged. Sometimes there's going to be other normative tensions between speech and equality, and we need to really kind of figure out how those exist in our automated systems. We have to make democratic decisions about them. They've always existed, but we also can acknowledge that technology allows us to mitigate some of these tensions in very creative ways, and that's happening. And again, it's something that I very much care about in the equality machine. I also talk about how we can really use technology, and especially the design of both digital technology in kind of an unembodied form, like our digital personal assistants, or like the defaults that we have in our text-to-speech, speech-to-text, the searches that we do for images, but also just the design of our robots, like our embodied forms, where we can really have a lot of stereotype subverting power that comes with the fact that we're using technology, that we're no longer limited by our past, our norms, our social norms, and our physicalities. So we need to celebrate that, and I celebrate that with a lot of positive examples in the book. And then again, we very much need to scale success. We need to experiment to help us, all of us, have a more informed discussion, have the adoption of allow the adoption, support the adoption of the better technologies that are out there. And that's where there is very much a role for public policy, but it's not necessarily the role that public policy is taking today, where both at the federal level here, the Biden administration's recent announcement of an AI Bill of Rights, which is very much in that alarmist kind of do not harm mindset, what is happening at the EU level with the policies that are there here in California, the laws and the bills that are being contemplated. I show that for the most part we're thinking about kind of the just the do not, the negative, and there are ways to think about technology as a public good and to support that through public policy, through more experimentation, through more investment, through procurement, and much more. So I'll end here. Daniel, I look forward to our conversation, and then the audience.
Thanks so much. That was a really great overview, and I can say, having read the book, I encourage everyone to still get the book, because there's so much great detail that you provide in here. Countless examples go into much more detail, and it's really a fascinating read. I wanted to start, I think, where you began here. As you say, most of the books today are about how AI and tech are bad or dangerous. They're destroying jobs. They're violating people's civil rights. They're invading everyone's privacy. And I mean, it seems like, if you want to write a bestseller, that's the easiest way to do it. So I wanted to ask a little bit about kind of what made you decide to challenge that narrative, and what kind of reception have you gotten so far?
Yeah, so I have been in these debates for a while, and as I said, I've seen not only kind of the fallacies and the misinformation that is out there, but also its consequence of like so many of us in the public, and then also just people who are in government making the wrong decisions based on this very flat, alarmist viewpoint. And so at the same time, and I start this the book actually with the personal story. At the same time, my personal trajectory, as I think so many different, so many of us, and I think so many examples on this, my personal story has been shaped by the potential and the wonderful benefits that technology has given us. I mean, all of us have seen it during the pandemic, that even, though we talk about technology as increasing isolation and, we're all on our smartphones and not connecting, the research actually suggests a much more nuanced story about, how technology contributes to our interactions and connectivity. And during the pandemic, we saw this, of how technology really supported our ability to stay connected. And so my personal story that I start with is, before I became a law professor, I was a data scientist in the military intelligence in Israel. And I saw the power of technology in lots of ways, and I always think about technology as a tool for, it's kind of neutral in the sense of it can be employed for good and for bad, but there's so much potential in how we work, how attribution happens, how we can, create more equality in our workplaces on this. And then another personal story is the one about my family. We're a type 1 diabetic family, so like millions and millions around the world. My middle daughter has diabetes, and I show how, it's through the data extraction and the medical devices that now have approved AI in them that there's been just a leap in the quality of life that and more access to many around the world that can be healthier and safer throughout their lives. So lots more stories, but to your question of what is the reception of this much more constructive, optimistic path forward that I described in the Equality Machine compared to the alarmist bestsellers, I think that it's really a moment that it's very ripe, that so many of us want. And I've been talking to the media about this, to journalists, that they all feel pretty frustrated. We all see that AI is getting so much better, that it's all around us, that it is impacting our lives, and we don't have enough language to talk about it in a sophisticated way. And journalists have been frustrated that there was this sense of like, all you should be describing is, if it bleeds, it reads. Kind of, that's what
Right.
some journalists have been telling me about, like, their editors. They just want the bad stories, the stories of the failed, and they're pushing back on that. So the Equality Machine comes to, I think, an audience that is really very thirsty for that path forward, for learning more about where we're going, and in a cautiously optimistic, but also like inclusive way that we can all shape our futures, and having much more agency, and not just being told just fear it and be outside of Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley has a problem or something like that.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, the different examples you give in the book, and the contrast you make between this kind of utopia versus dystopian view that really pervades a lot of the narratives. Personally, I'm a technology optimist, but it's not because I think the technology is inherently good, or that most technology is inherently good. It's because I think most people are inherently good. And so I think, on the long, scale of time, we move towards, addressing so many problems using the tools at our disposal. I think the critique that a lot of people have of the tech industry is that they say, well, isn't power all controlled by the Elon Musks of the world, right? And so I wanted to give you a chance to kind of address that critique where people say, yes, I like my, smartwatch, and I like, the new VR headset that allows me to, understand empathy in ways, that I couldn't before. But I don't trust the people in charge, and that colors my opinion.
Yeah, no, I love the way that you framed it, that, overall you think that most people are going to have good faith goals. We're not going to agree on everything. And as I said, there's lots of tensions between like what, particular decisions should be made. And, when we have different social goals and different wants and needs. But so I actually do quite a bit of consulting of private industry, and I'll take the example of content moderation, which I research, and I've written a few scholarly articles about, and I talk about in the book. There's been so much discontent, like in the reporting about like, why are social platforms not doing enough? Why are they doing too much? And we, as a society, we can debate about the right lines. But when you see the actual workings of the big platforms, I think that they're really trying to do the best that they can with the tools that they can, and it is getting better. So much of it is being automated in a way that is getting better. So I think, there's always going to be, with private industry, there's going to be a profit motivation, and that's a good thing. I mean, I'm with you. Like we have, as a society, we have all these different checks and balances. We have the private market, and as I said in the talk, we really need also checks through public policy on the things that we really need to kind of divert from. We need to kind of figure out. It's something that, again, I've long written about, this kind of regulatory pyramid. Like, what are all the things that through competition, through private markets, we can get right? And there's a lot of that, and we see that progress happening, like the stuff that I described about getting our technologies like speech to text recognition or search algorithms, or kind of accuracy in lending, or different things that where I think that there's a very good alignment between the goals of having more accuracy and fairness line up pretty well, not completely, but well, with a kind of market incentive of doing better from a competitive standpoint. And then there's going to be, the bad actors. There's going to be the, at the top of the pyramid, it gets smaller, where we'll need the bigger guns to control, the very problematic practices. But we need to have that conversation. We barely have that conversation. We're bundling this, like, everything that's happening with, like you described, this kind of mindset of, oh, there's this one, like, person who's going to control, everything that's happening and destroy our world, which is just not the right story.
Yeah. I want to stay on this question of kind of who's in charge, and ask you about diversity in tech, which you also talk about in the book, and obviously, your work on labor issues touches on this as well. How do you think tech companies should be addressing diversity questions? And the kind of the flip side to that is the why part, right? In terms of, I think one of the reasons why so many people urgently want to see tech become more diverse is because they see that as the solution to oversights, in terms of missed opportunities to use tech to address different populations. But it seems like addressing diversity is more of a generational problem. You can't solve that overnight. So I guess the second part of my question to you is, for companies that can't solve diversity overnight, what else should they be doing with their existing workforce? In terms of what skills would you like to see them take on?
Right. I mean, so one of the things that, again, this is part of the motivation of the equality machine, is that there's an endogenous process here of when we tell a story about how bad technology is and how it automates inequality and it excludes and it's biased, there's less of motivation and kind of a will of people that are super talented, that could contribute to the diversity in Silicon Valley, to actually go and have skin in the game, because the success stories are much less celebrated. So I actually made a very deliberate effort in the Equality Machine to celebrate diversity that already exists in the industry and in research and academia, and different leaders and different sectors, where they're making a change that I really think that that can be kind of a trickle down of mentoring and highlighting and kind of making it clear what we can actually do. And we need to do, you said it's a generational thing, it doesn't happen overnight. We really need to, again, make much more of an effort of investing in digital literacy and digital education from a very young age. Again, instead of just telling like parents, get your kids off the computer, like they're going to get addicted, help them understand where to redirect and what kinds of education is needed to to enter into these STEM fields and have more diversity in that way. So that's, it is something that I think can happen, but we need to be deliberate about it. When you ask about what companies can do now, and many of them are doing that, and I am in talks with a lot of them. I'm on the board of a consortium that's called the Equal Pay Alliance, where companies, kind of industry leaders, diverse, from like NerdWallet to Adobe and Nordstrom, are thinking about how they can use software to correct pay inequities and performance inequities, through just having using the computational abilities of the software that is kind of not that sees and detects inequities that had not otherwise been seen through the naked eye, and having continuous auditing of who's being hired, who's being evaluated for talent. And so we actually, again, there's a lot of good stories of closing the pay gap using digitization, with a lot of business leaders. I also talk about these third-party platforms. So like if you think about it, platforms like LinkedIn or apps like Know Your Worth, where you're crowdsourcing a lot of the just information that's out there that used to be really concentrated by employers, is now out there about like, where can we find the better jobs? Who's paying more? How are we going to actually be rewarded for our talent? That's happening in the market, and we see movement on that. So I think again, there are a lot of positive examples that are happening, and it, I think our goal should be to spread that, the success stories, and to help everybody kind of figure out how to do better with the tools that we have.
Yeah, you mentioned in the book that you kind of reached some of these counterintuitive conclusions, or that the conclusions are somewhat counterintuitive, like it might be better, for example, to collect gender and race data to prevent discrimination. So algorithms need that data. Are there other kind of ideas out there, I guess, that are conventional wisdom that you're trying to challenge with your book, or that you'd encourage people to rethink?
Yeah. So definitely with the biometrics, it's been something that we really fear. Like anything from our genetic data makeup to our behavioral and our emotional states. There's a lot of fear of how that will play out. But again, these are tools that are getting better in kind of shifting away from what in the CS world it would be called, that we used to kind of build our algorithms through exploiting what has been done in the past. And the more we're actually allowing, this, that's kind of the exploration algorithms, or the exploitation algorithms, the more we're moving to exploratory or kind of exploration algorithms that just look at many other factors that exist in our humanity. We can find patterns that delink this kind of sticky identity of what our gender is, what our race is, what our national origin, our race, and find kind of new ways to really determine, what we're good at, what we love, what our passions are. So really kind of shedding a lot of our past biases. So I actually think that, again, it relates to this overarching lens that the more we know, the more we can actually correct bias and create more equality. Yeah, I mean, there's so many other just examples, kind of counterintuitive, just like about safety, like how should we think about like a robo taxi getting into an accident. I think there's a lot of, you mentioned this generational kind of progress or gaps. I see a lot of generational differences in how much we'll be ready to accept giving up control and allowing for more autonomous vehicles, autonomous surgeons. But the I think the most important insight is that we can actually help ourselves become more rational about how we interact with technology. So I use cognitive and kind of behavioral insights, and not just assessing the technology, but also helping people interact better with machines. So kind of figuring out whether we actually need to know. Here's a counterintuitive kind of insight that I've been showing that really goes against a lot of the proposals that are right now before Washington and the EU. So there's this stance that we should have a right to know when we're interacting with a bot, right? Like the right to be informed, at any point where there's algorithmic decision making being made. And I show that, if we're not that good in assessing the comparative advantages and understanding the technology yet, sometimes it can create much more harm than good. For example, if a surgeon is told this decision about like where to operate was made by a bot versus by a fellow human, another doctor who's an expert in, in screening or radiology. It may be, and this is an empirical question, but there's a lot of empirical evidence to support this. It may be that notifying the surgeon about the fact that it's a bot that's making the more accurate decision will create less health and less safe, procedures, because they'll be more likely to reject the recommendations. And I can tell that story in so many other contexts, in like our financial decision making, and decisions about like law enforcement and bail. We really need to ask, what are we trying to achieve and how to get there. So not just kind of assuming that there's, just like I said, privileging of privacy as kind of the one right that we, always need to keep as like a top. We also need to understand that it's not always the case that we need to know at every stage, which is it that's making the decision. We just need to trust, and we need to have systems that trust and verify that we're deploying the safest system that we have.
Yeah. I want to turn to some audience questions in just a minute. So I just want to remind people who are watching the live stream, you can submit them online. The link to submit them is below the video or in the video description. There's already some great questions that have come in. You can also vote on the questions you want to see asked. But I wanted to, one of my favorite quotes in the book that I really loved was where you say, what if we flip the script and instead adopt a mindset that says inequality faces a tech challenge. I love that concept of inequality facing a tech challenge. And it got me thinking too, how can you operationalize that in some of these government agencies, particularly ones that are focused on addressing discrimination or inequality? Because right now, most are focused on looking at problems after the fact, which is completely fine. Look at outcomes. I agree with that. But there's also, I'm wondering if there's opportunities for them to think about how can they improve outcomes too, right? How can they help raise the bar? How can they, proactively identify opportunities to do things better? I was curious, what message might you give to, regulators or policymakers that like this mindset that you put out there of, inequality facing a tech challenge? How do we make that a reality?
Right. Yeah. So we actually need to find and really make an effort to understand what is the data that we don't have, and collect it. So Daniel, you can talk about this too. You've been also thinking about data rich versus data poor communities, and really kind of prioritizing the data collection where it has been neglected for years. And so again, flipping it and saying there's actually a right to have to be included, to have more information and understanding about the social problems that are like the most wicked problems that we face. So prioritizing. So if there's, looking at climate change and poverty and education imbalances, and really directing resources to inclusion and to kind of the interactions that happen that between technology and humans, but also between humans when they are in rich technological settings. We talked about digital literacy. We can kind of really, and again, I think this has to happen with investment. So these, we need the public will to take technologies that we have, for example, facial recognition. And I gave examples about how facial recognition can help in health in the health industry and tackling trafficking, sex trafficking, and missing children. Law enforcement and you know, kind of, finding. So I'll give you an example that's actually near and dear to my heart. There's a lot of unenforceable contracts that consumers and employees are signing these days, which means that we do have laws on the books. We have a lot of protections about like not signing non-competes when they are unreasonable or unenforceable. In California, you can't sign non-competes at all. You can't make your employees sign non-competes. And that's actually an area of research that I've done a lot of work with the Obama administration, with the Biden administration. I wrote my first book, Talent Wants to Be Free, about how non-competes are bad for market competition, for innovation, for talent mobility, for pay equity. And we can digitize, again, like we can take these tools that we have now this is the flipping the script. We can actually have government or like watchdogs, private watchdogs, use these tools to find all the unenforceable clauses that are out there that tell employees that they are bound by a non-compete, or tell consumers that they are bound by some liquidated damages, whatever clause that really would not be enforceable, and kind of scrape all of that and hold market actors accountable to the laws that we already have. So we can do all of that, but we just need to understand that the capabilities are out there, and we can take control over them and seek the goals that we value, the norms that we have, seek to direct technology to support those.
So we've got two interesting questions from the audience, both to get into the concept of equality. So one question came on YouTube. It's what's the role of government in promoting equality and technology deployment? And so they give the example of diabetes being more prevalent in the Black community, and then how can these diabetes tools be prioritized for use in that community? How do you think about equality of use or equality of access to technology?
Yeah. The story of in diabetes management of extracting more and more data to make the algorithms that decide about insulin boluses and that kind of connect in a smart way the continuous glucose monitors with the pumps is one of having more information and more accurate information and personalized information. But for years, this has been pretty concentrated. So the companies extract that data, but we don't really have, as users, we don't have access to it. There's actually a really interesting story in that community about kind of the hackers, the night owls who've been, they're the patients or the families of patients that have been creating kind of alternative systems that are crowdsourcing and open sourcing all of this information and making it more accessible. So that I think is a great role for government to just say, we can find the right balance. And this, I mean, it's not an easy question ever when we talk about intellectual property. You mentioned that, I write about intellectual property, and it's kind of always this challenge of, how do we incentivize innovation by private firms, and then also, create more accessible databases and allow, commercialization and access in a way that is more inclusive. But I think that with health data, we want to allow, first of all, we want to make sure that the, everything that gets approved, like with FDA trials and FDA approval is based on representative data. So the question asks about the Black community. Definitely, we want to always make sure that we're studying different demographics and having the fuller picture. And I talk about this then in the chapter of about health in the equality machine. But we also, I think, can think about the public option here of having databases, just like we did with genetic data, databases that are more public and are not proprietary, that create greater access and allow the spreading of these life-saving technologies around the world.
So the other question that came in on equality was, I put this, they said, first, happy this book exists. What do you think about the next 10 to 30 years when AI may be more capable or intelligent than people? How do you think that would affect equality?
So you're asking about the next 10 years, what will happen?
Well, I think the question was, maybe you could, maybe we can just assume their premise of at some point, the technology will be increasingly intelligent. And I guess the question is, is there a equality issue between people versus bots that will come about?
Right. Yeah. So again, a lot of what I try to do in the equality machine is get our stories straight about, like, what do we actually fear? Do we fear AI that's not good enough, or do we fear AI that's too good? Do we fear incompetence or omnicompetence? And we have to separate those out. I think we all, kind of the consensus in the field is that we're nowhere near like truly sentient singular AI, but it is very, very much getting better. So there, maybe some of the question, and I think it's a very important question to ask, is about what automation is going to do, not only to our settings, our environments where we're interacting with AI and we're benefiting from like more information, better health, more representative media, but at the same time, there's going to be some job loss, and that that's something that we can. There's a very important debate in the literature about what that actually means. I think there's going to be a lot of job creation, and there's going to be some patterned job restructuring and job loss. So very important to separate that question from the actual competence and how good AI is getting. And again, that's something that's muddled a lot of times. But we definitely need to think about when AI is getting so good, what is its comparative advantages in different positions and different like skills and industries, and then think about how are we setting up our community and reskilling for kind of a continuing relationship with the job market. Except I again, it's something that I've thought about a lot. We might have a different relationship of what does it mean to have full-time work, or what will work look like? And again, it's something that I very much think is a lively conversation that we should be having.
Great. Well, I think we're basically out of time. Again, thank you so much for the conversation today. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on your book. And again, I'll encourage people to buy this book. It's a great read. So thank you again, Orly, for being with us today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.